Recording in progress. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Wilcher,
Present.
Councilmember Dabala,
Present.
Councilmember Gibson,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens,
Present.
Councilmember Honzak,
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Yes, y'all.
All right. Good evening, everyone. And so this evening, just a quick run through of our agenda. We'll start with a proclamation recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. We also will have a public hearing on the proposed housing tax credits, followed by a voting session, a resolution approving the FY26 budget schedule, and a work session on the proposed housing tax credits. On Friday, October the 11th is Yom Kippur, begins at sunset. As a reminder, on Monday, October the 14th is Indigenous Peoples Day. The city offices and facilities are open. On Wednesday, October the 16th, the City Council will meet at 7:30. We will have 3 work sessions that evening. The first is the Food Insecurity Grant Recommendations, FY25 Budget Amendment number 2, as well as proposed housing tax credits. On Wednesday, October the 23rd, the City Council will meet at 7:30. We will have 3 items on the agenda: voting session, first reading ordinance tax credit, or I'm sorry, first reading tax credit ordinance, first reading ordinance approving the FY25 budget amendment number 2, ordinance approving food insecurity grants. We will also have a work session on police vehicles, as well as unlawful restricted covenants. On Saturday, as a reminder for everyone, October the 26th is a Monster Bash. Okay, and so with that, we're going to first, I am going to read our proclamation in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day. Whereas Columbus Day is observed as a federal holiday on the second Monday in October, and whereas the day recognizes the October 12, 1492 landing of Christopher Columbus on an island in the Caribbean, marking the Europeans' first intrusion into the Americas. And whereas this contact began centuries of colonization on lands already settled by Native peoples and exploration of the Americans' resources. And whereas Indigenous Americans experienced conquest, enslavement, displacement, and disease, which decimated the population. And whereas Tacoma Park now sits upon the ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank, the Toxinit, and the Pascaway peoples, and Indigenous people make their homes in the city today. And whereas the City Council recognizes the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day by adopting Resolution 2017-39, reimagining Columbus Day as an opportunity to celebrate Indigenous heritage and resiliency. And whereas, although it is a federal holiday, Columbus Day is not a holiday for City of Tacoma Park employees, and the city government functions and meetings continue on their usual schedule. And whereas recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day serves as a reminder to reflect on the Native people, past and present, who have cared for this land over millennia. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, hereby proclaim October the 12th, 2024, as Indigenous Peoples Day in Tacoma Park to acknowledge and celebrate the culture and sacrifice of the first people of this land. Great. And then second, I do just want to acknowledge Councilmember Honzak on her birthday. So let's all just give Councilmember Honzak happy birthday.
Yeah, 49 forever.
Her mic wasn't on, but she will say it's 49 forever. So, so happy birthday, Councilmember Honzak. All right. And so also, I know that right now the people in the Tampa area of Florida are getting ready to experience a catastrophic hurricane. And our thoughts and prayers are with all of the people that are either avoiding the storm or hunkering down. We hope for everyone's safety during this difficult time. And with that, we're going to move things forward to our public hearing this evening. There was a sign-up sheet, which our city clerk has brought forward. Thank you. Okay. And so when I call your name, please feel free to come up to the mic. We are doing 3 minutes this evening. Okay, the first person who signed up, oh, and if you did not sign up, don't worry. After the people who've signed up, we will make sure that if there are other public comments this evening, we'll get to you. The first person who signed up is Sabrina Eaton.
Hi there. Thanks for, letting me come up and speak. This is Sabrina Eaton of 7019 Eastern Avenue. I'd like to weigh in on the tax abatement package the City Council is considering. I'm sympathetic to the parts of the proposal that would give tax credits to owners of affordable rental housing, therefore foregoing the money they'd get from charging market rate rents to provide a public good, housing for folks who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. I oppose giving developers of market rate housing a 10-year pass on municipal taxes. They'll profit from charging higher rents. They aren't giving anything up like the building owners who provide affordable housing. They should pay the bills for the city services they consume. You shouldn't force other taxpayers to subsidize them. I'm also surprised that you're considering voting on any of this before the financial impact of these proposals is available. Please hold off on voting until you and the community have had a chance to review the numbers. Because the Adventist Hospital property has been upzoned to allow construction of thousands of new apartment units, we could end up with thousands of new residents using community services without paying for them for a decade, if you approve this subsidy for market rate apartment buildings. Just as you guys ought to be running the numbers to determine whether different proposals make sense for the city's budget, everyone who lives in this city has to run their household budget numbers. In the 30 years since we bought a fixer-upper here on our modest public service type job salaries, it has become far less affordable to live here. Skyrocketing property taxes are a big part of that. Plenty of homeowners here did not pay $1 zillion for their homes, don't have access to buckets of money, as sometimes the council seems to assume, and are struggling to make ends meet. Sticking it to us to help developers make big bucks doesn't cut it. Please don't do so. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you very much. Next person, Jan Rain.
Good evening. I wholeheartedly oppose the rush to judgment and the first proposed tax credit itself. The city is rushing to approve the proposed tax credit without doing the due diligence required to develop a thoughtful, data-driven proposal that reflects the views of its constituents. I first heard of this plan at the forum. Most residents have no idea that this is happening or have only a very dim idea. The city gives no explanation or justification for this rush. I can think of no good reason for the rush. This is not an emergency, It's not like we have to, rush to judgment here. And it can only raise suspicion and distrust in the process and in the proposal itself. Residents should have the opportunity to meaningfully engage with staff and council members in problem solving that avoids or at least mitigates harmful unintended consequences. This rush to judgment makes this kind of collaboration impossible. We need a comprehensive study to determine the full financial costs and benefits, who benefits and how, who pays, what the social costs and trade-offs are, and what protections should be included. The proposed plan leaves lots of room for harmful unintended consequences. Developers have every market incentive to make as much profit as possible. This plan has no mechanism to prevent these rates from being unaffordable at the outset. Having lived in several cities, I have seen what happens when cities invite developers to build without placing meaningful guardrails to prevent them from using their money, power, and influence to induce city government to serve their pecuniary interests, often to the detriment of residents and the environment. There are many questions that need answering. I wish I had the time to ask them. They appear
Thank
in
you.
my...
I'm sorry, your time is up. Okay, so that's the only folks that we have that signed up in the room. So do we have people who signed up virtually? Okay, so should we finish out the room and then we'll go to the virtual folks? Okay, okay, perfect. All right, so do we have any folks who did not sign up who would like to speak?
Hi, City Council. My name is Susan Rogers, and I live at 416 Lincoln Avenue in Ward 2. I'm also a member of Community Vision Tacoma. I am a retired 75-year-old woman who lives on a limited income. As a person who's buying a home, I've experienced outrageously high increases in my property tax, which is becoming harder to budget for. Over time, I've questioned how many contributions to the city budget are being spent, including the continued increased cost of the library renovation. I listened to the presentation in September about the proposed tax credits for housing. I am quite concerned that the long tax abatement period that will be given to developers will end up once again driving up property taxes to help pay for this funding scheme. This in turn will lead to the displacement of older homeowners like myself. Moreover, I have concerns about how this tax credit funding plan will impact racial and economic diversity of our city. It will partially be used to fund upzoning proposed in the MMPA, which I feel threatens the displacement of lower income tenants and promotes the overall gentrification of Tacoma Park. I moved to Tacoma Park because of its diversity, and I certainly do not want my property tax dollars to contribute to furthering a more wealthy, white Tacoma Park. Of your 4 proposals, I think I would be willing to have some of my tax dollars support the one, I think it's the 3rd, that would contribute to renovation of existing buildings, which I feel has the most opportunity to not displace existing people out of their homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments?
Hello, members of the council. My name is Carter Doherty. I'm Crescent Place in Ward 1. I'm here representing the steering committee of Montgomery for All. We're a grassroots community-led group advocating for sustainable, inclusive land use, housing, and transit policies in Montgomery County. I need to read that and memorize it, I suppose. In general, I think it's safe to say we wrote you a letter supporting these proposals without delving into the details. I think our main message would be that they can serve as a useful nudge to get certain projects over the line. In general, in Montgomery County, we have a housing shortage, so whether it is in the band of what we call affordable housing or, as it's known, attainable housing, we need more housing. So in generally, that's a good thing to do. That said, one of our favorite lines when it comes to housing policy is necessary but not sufficient. just like I would have said about the minor master plan, necessary but not sufficient. The other things that are going to be necessary are sustained advocacy to ensure that things actually get built. We have other things coming up on the Montgomery County Planning Board's docket that will necessitate input from Tacoma Park, both to the Planning Board and to the County Council. There's simply a lot more East Silver Spring communities, that's coming up too. There's simply a lot to do as we face not only a shortage, but obviously high prices. And the only thing that remedies that, again, absolutely necessary but not sufficient, is more building. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind. Taking off my hat as a representative of Montgomery for All and simply a Tacoma Parker, I want to say that I do encourage you to look very, very carefully at the fiscal impacts of this. At the same time, I would be inclined to take with a grain of salt this talk of sort of subsidizing other parts of the city, because that's essentially what unless you're the poorest resident of the city, your taxes are in some ways subsidizing certain services or activities. We're in a little democracy here, and that's how we decided we do this. And I think you should retain your prerogative to approve this when you decide to approve it. There is no blackout period in which you are not allowed to make decisions. That's all I have to say as Carter Doherty, Tacoma Park resident, and what we had to say on Montgomery for All is before you in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments this evening for the public hearing? Come on down.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but I couldn't resist. I got an email, and it just brings this right to mind. And the person wrote me that the MMPA does not require there be no net loss of affordable housing in the MMPA, contrary to what was said by the housing director at the Housing Forum. What it does is that it recommends, I don't know to whom, okay, and that it prioritizes, whatever that means, but does not require. And it offers no specific recommendations as to how these things will be accomplished. The only legally effective thing about the MMPA was to change the zoning. It claims that other things will be woven into the plan as yet unspecified. Finally, I would remind you of what Councilmember Siemens himself said from that spot. He said, recommendations are not requirements. As a person who worked 5 years for multiple developers, I can tell you what will happen. They will get a permit on the Humble, and they will file 4 amendments to the application for permit. And every one of them will seek to do what other developers do, and they do every time. No parking requirements, no density requirements, and if you want, I will go on the record and say, I will happily contribute to building. If we're going to use our tax dollars, not 15%, make it 30%. It's our money. We should have some say. And I'll step straight up. And I just want you to please be careful. You people are thoughtful, and God knows you work hard enough. You know what I mean? Think this through. These people do not play. Jared Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis, and he bought whole blocks of affordable housing in Baltimore. I mean, he and the Trump administration created these enterprise zones. You don't think they did it because they want to help people, do you? That's what I presume. But thanks again. I mean, you all deserve our gratitude, and I only have an inkling of how much work it is, but I am grateful, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments? Come on down.
Hi, I'm Jessica Landman, and I live in Ward 1. This evening, I'm only going to comment about the procedure that is being followed to consider this tax package. The holding of the public hearing before we have the fiscal analysis limits the representatives from the public from giving you a detailed assessment of their view of how effectively our tax dollars are being potentially spent. And it limits our ability to comment in a meaningful way on the actual potential impacts of this, and actually even on the quality of the fiscal analysis, which we have not yet seen. So I really have to question how seriously this public hearing is being taken. If you're asking us to give you our feedback without giving us the necessary information to analyze the proposal, you're not really asking for meaningful public comment. And I view that as a performance as opposed to carrying out the procedure in a meaningful way for notice and comment to have any effect on your decisions. So I strongly encourage you to reschedule another public hearing at a timely fashion after we have the fiscal analysis in hand and can provide you with meaningful input. Otherwise, I feel as if this public hearing is not really a public hearing. And I would encourage you as well for the fiscal analysis to consider not only a citywide tax incentive program for multifamily housing construction, but a targeted one modeled on the type of targeting that College Park did, although perhaps not with respect to housing, but targeting is feasible. It's done all the time, and that might make a better case, both fiscally and just procedurally, for what you're proposing to do. So please put that into your fiscal analysis, and please give us another opportunity for meaningful public input after we have that analysis in hand for a reasonable time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments in the room?
Good evening. My name is David Reed. As president of the Long Branch Sligo Community Association, I'm pleased to welcome State Senator Will Smith, our Mayor Talisha Searcy, and Ward Council member Cindy DiBala to our annual meeting that will take place this Sunday. We have asked guests to talk to us about budgets and taxes at the state and local levels. We want to thank them for their willingness to help the community understand the proposals and how to address the financial challenges before us. Now, in my personal capacity, I'd like to address the 3 housing tax credit proposals before the council. My comments are based on the assumption that one of the principal drivers of the tax proposals is to increase city revenues in the context of our unsustainable fiscal policy. The 3 proposals anticipate external capital investments that range from $2 million to $100 million. And when considering foregone and increased revenues, the proposals, per the HCD memo of July 24th, would cost the city between $150,000 to $407,000 per year in lost revenue. Having been a home builder at different points in my life, I would strongly embrace efforts to increase affordable housing. However, I would suggest that a far more effective way of expanding the city's tax base in the short and medium terms would be to use the same volume of foregone tax revenue to incentivize local businesses rather than provide benefits for external builders. How many storefronts are now closed along University Boulevard that need an economic boost to reopen? How many locally owned businesses along New Hampshire Avenue could be incentivized with provision of multi-year tax credits? I would rather see the $150,000 to $407,000 in foregone revenues be used to promote an African-American travel agency, a Haitian bakery, an Indian clothing store, a West African restaurant in Ward 6. I say we provide $15,000 to $50,000 in tax credits to new startups, rather than directing financial benefits to EYA, JB Smith, and some private equity firm. That would benefit local entrepreneurs and strengthen their cultural roots in our city. Not only would such a directed city program prepare Ward 6 for recovery once the Purple Line is open, but it also laid the commercial foundation for supporting construction of more affordable housing in Ward 6 and along New Hampshire Avenue. Using tax credits in a targeted way would help move Ward 6 from what is often seen as a distant outpost to the real Tacoma Park to become a true commercial hub that would benefit all residents in our city. To the best of my knowledge, there is not a dedicated program to revitalize the area that has been seriously affected by the COVID pandemic and the Purple Line. I believe that opportunity could lie before us.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments in the room?
Sir David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. Enacting a new house credit now would be declaring the Minor Master Plan Amendment, MMPA, a failure before it even starts, before the zoning changes it calls for are made. One of the MMPA goals of county planning is to encourage new housing. There's reason to believe that county staff has done the job right. City staff has noted that city efforts are a relatively small part of the housing push, the cherry on the top. And so the question becomes, why add the cherry if the sundae is already sweet enough? The question is especially important given the cost of the cherry. Folks have mentioned the tax revenue being foregone, but not the amount. If county planning's dream is realized, 200 units will go in on the site of the abandoned hospital at $1 million apiece. If the new tax credit is enacted, that $200 million of housing will be taxed on the current assessed value of $15 million. About. That $185 million difference means a bit more than $1 million of annual property tax revenue being foregone. $1 million is a big number in my book, especially given the city's structural deficit. There's also the matter of city costs for new housing. Impact fees are meant to cover initial cost. They do not cover ongoing cost. The city now has about $4,400 a year of general expense spending per housing unit. If 200 units are built, additional expense of $880,000 might be expected. About half of the city's general fund revenue comes from property taxes, about half from other sources. So we might expect $440,000 of the new expense to come from sources other than property tax, and $440,000 to come from property tax. Given the proposed tax credits, that $440,000 of property tax won't be coming from the new housing. It will be paid by current property tax owners by way of a 1 or 2 cent increase in the property tax rate. That may well be a higher price than the council is willing to impose or that owners are able to pay. I believe it's worthwhile to see what the effects of the MMPA will be on its own before the city takes action. I hope the council will defer the new housing tax credit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments this evening?
Colleen Cordes, Ward 1, and I think my fellow residents have made some very thoughtful comments tonight. One thing that I'm really concerned about is that what we've come to realize as a community is over the last year is that there's an urgency that of all the housing needs, the most urgent thing probably to prevent displacement and to preserve affordable housing is to renovate old buildings so that they're not a target for being torn down and people being displaced. So given that, I'm really concerned about the lack of balance in the tax credits. I too feel if one of the major driving forces here is the structural deficit, I don't understand how waiving the taxes that would be received from market rate properties for 15 years, and it would be 15 years because it'll be a few years for them to be built. How does that, it just doesn't seem to make sense. And meanwhile, that last tax credit has been kind of downplayed now. I'm not sure it looks like it would just be $50,000 a year. And if you look at in the presentation, how many buildings, small buildings, 2 every other year, 2 every other year of a small building. 50,000 is just not enough for this urgent priority we have right now to get these buildings renovated. So I urge you to avoid waiving the taxes that could help us over time renovate these buildings and support the affordable housing we have now with the tax credits for the affordable housing, and also maybe the 30% AMI on that, the deed restricted buildings. That seems very low for them, and I'm wondering if the staff has received an analysis from those property owners of what they actually need to be able to keep those buildings affordable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments? All right, we're going to go to our virtual comments.
Ashley Brookshire on Zoom.
Hi, my name is Ashley Brookshire, and I am a resident of 7515 Carroll Avenue in Ward 3. And I am speaking tonight on behalf of Tacoma for All, which is a group of Maryland and DC neighbors who promote a sustainable, equitable, transit-oriented community with plenty of homes. And we at Tacoma for All, we strongly support all of the proposed tax credit options that the city staff have spent so much time on and put together with their expertise. We think these tax credits would directly support our goals of helping to alleviate the housing crisis that we have nationwide and also here in Montgomery County. And as you all on the council are very well aware, Tacoma Park has not added any new multifamily housing in decades. And these tax credits would be a modest gesture to show that the city welcomes new buildings and welcomes that kind of investment. Fairly or unfairly, we have a reputation as a place that is unfriendly to these sorts of developments, and these tax credits would send a signal that we do not deserve that reputation and that we would welcome these kinds of new neighbors being added to our city. And although it is obviously the council's responsibility to consider the potential fiscal impact of any and all new policies, I hope that you will keep in mind that there is a cost to doing nothing. Yes, these credits will mean foregoing potential new tax revenue over a set number of years. But if we don't grow our tax base by encouraging these buildings to be built in the first place, there will be no new revenue at all. And the burden on existing city homeowners like myself is just going to continue to increase. We need to diversify and grow that tax base to decrease the burden on individual homeowners. And also future residents of these buildings are left out of the conversation entirely. There are so many people who would like to share in our city and the wonderful, wonderful benefits that we all enjoy living here, but they aren't able to because they can't afford a home here. And so we hope that you will support these tax credits and vote for them, help them become law. And sorry, my toddler is ready to go to bed. I'm not sure if you can hear him. And we hope you will support these tax credits and help welcome new people to Tacoma Park and create more housing here that we desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so our next commenter. Okay. Perfect. All right. So that means that our public hearing this evening has closed. Just as a reminder, there will be opportunities to provide public comments during future council meetings on this topic. Just as a reminder for folks, there is I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong form. There is a work session scheduled for next Wednesday, October the 16th at 7:30. So there will be additional opportunities, and we will definitely get additional information out in terms of whether or not sign up is needed to provide comments during those meetings. All right, so we're going to move to public comments on voting items. As a reminder, voting items this evening is a resolution approving the FY26 budget schedule. Do you have any public comments on the FY26 budget schedule? Any virtual comments on the budget schedule? That's not the hot topic of the moment. All right. Any general public comments this evening? General public comments. All right, seeing none in the room, do you have any virtual general public comments this evening?
So we have Mary Machui on Zoom.
Wonderful. Hi, Mary Jane. I think she's muted. Mary Jane, you're muted.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can't see me though. I don't know why not. Okay. Hi, I'm Mary Jane Machui. I've lived at 404 Boyd Avenue in Ward 2 for over 39 years. My son with disabilities was born here. You talk about racial equity. How about disability equity? My son is Black and has disabilities, but you don't seem to care. Tacoma Park has never seemed to care that much about him. Anyways, during the past several years, there have been at least 3 proposed developments in Tacoma Park. One was the co-op. I remember that well. That went on for years. The second was the library and community center, a redo that's happening now, and which I was strongly against. And 3, the proposed minor master plan. No, none of these 3 have helped us. Matter of fact, has contributed to gentrification. And I'm wondering, you all seem to be willing to spend thousands and maybe millions of dollars to help throw at people who are better off than us. And no one is lower than someone who's low income with disabilities. That's as low as you can go. Matter of fact, most people who are living on the street are disabled people. Keep that in mind, okay? When you make your decisions, keep us, that we are alive and we are human beings, okay? And the gentrification is killing us. The complicated property tax system is stressing me out so much I almost felt like killing myself. It was just so depressing. And the city has refused to do anything to help us. I went to the housing office and they said, oh, we can't help. The only people who can help you was the Village of Tacoma Park. The Village of Tacoma Park, bless their souls, they're volunteers, mostly older volunteers. They can't do that much. That for some reason, the housing director seems to think that they can perform miracles. They can give me my house, the house I'd like to turn into a group house for people with disabilities. I have begged for this for years, but yet you rather spend your money helping other people. Why don't you help us for a change? Please, we deserve it, and we are the most underserved people. Okay? And we come in all different colors and religions and races. Thank you. I have begged and begged since 2015. Why don't you do something? Please do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Machui. Okay, we're going to move on to council comments. All right, Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just want to share that the council members and some of the staff received a document, an email document from Paul Krastowski titled, "Could Tacoma Park be the next Asheville?" And he's offering to give a presentation detailing the science behind the facts and actions that can be taken. Basically, we are threatened as Asheville was more than threatened. Asheville hit, and anyhow, there are any number of examples of climate change, and Mr. Krastowski, Professor Krastowski, is willing to talk with us. I'm recommending that as soon as possible that we actually hear from him and hear the science behind the stormwater issues and the flooding issues that could hit us if we're not better prepared. Then mainly, I just want to thank all of acknowledge the many residents participating tonight with the housing tax credit hearing. I want to highlight a couple that I support and would like to hold up their interest. I do think that there's unnecessary haste in the housing tax credits being discussed and being voted on. I'm not sure why we have to rush get it done this council session. I won't be able to vote on it next council session, but I think more time is needed. I think it is a disservice to the residents to not have the fiscal impact statement here for you in the hearing. So having a second hearing makes sense to me with all the facts for the residents. The untested impact of the MMPA, I think I agree that it should be given a chance to do what it what it was intended to do without putting it on steroids and affecting us perhaps negatively, as Mr. Olson pointed out, the property taxes at the hospital site potentially reaching $1 million a year that would be defrayed or forgiven. And that, and then also the general expenses that were mentioned, the cost of these various tax credit proposals, particularly the first one, the new housing tax credit, there are costs. This is not a free lunch, and there are costs, ongoing costs besides the initial costs, and some of them will fall on property owners. I hope not to become a tax rate increase, as Mr. Olson suggested. We are unfortunately focusing on the process. I do think that we have to work the best we can to dispel distrust, build trust in our processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say I am heartened and appreciative of the comments that are directed toward Ward 6 and the concerns along New Hampshire Avenue and the Purple Line. I've been beating every drum and flogging every state highway representative that I can think of to try to make it more amenable over there, much to the chagrin of many people, including people who live in my ward. But we have had some success with that advocacy, and I did want to mention a couple of things in relation to that. When we're talking about those things and developing the crossroads and making the crossroads amenable to the rest of Tacoma Park, it's important to remember that we do have the Crossroads Development Authority, and it is the only business authority that is codified because of the importance strategically to our budget. It is the biggest producer of personal property tax revenue for the city. And it has basically, since I've lived there and the Giant closed, been a place where people who are from other places have an opportunity to buy the things that they need because there is no other place to buy those things. And I am only a little bit concerned at this point about the inclinations that people have towards trying to make those businesses more amenable to the rest of Tacoma Park, because I would argue that they're pretty amenable now. We haven't had an issue at the Walgreens since I had to elevate the sort of racial incident that I had with their staff into a larger issue, and now they pay attention. We have the number 7 Subway, the number 3 Chuck E. Cheese, and the number 1 Walgreens in Maryland in that area as it stands right now, with whatever perceptions there were of the area. And I think that that kind of leads to another thing, and I'm probably going to go maybe just a little bit over, because it's important that people who care about things know about things. And that's how you don't alienate people. And so one of the things that I think that we're doing in our debates and discussions about development is potentially alienating the people who own the property. Those people are currently in court attempting to ensure that they can have semi or directly discriminatory policies in their workplaces because it is their religious right to do so. Those people also own the parcel, and they are going to do with the parcel what they want to do with the parcel. And so I'd really encourage everyone who's concerned about this part of the issue to be mindful of how alienated people who are religious and or people who are minorities are about the things that make them who they are, while we're trying to talk about how we're essentially mentally seizing their parcel when we have no ability to do so. And I want that to be heard, because I do believe that there is a sincere intent to make sure that we have affordable housing here. And I do believe that there are people here who are suddenly involved in the issue. But I also know that our website is prolific in making announcements about when things are happening. And that one of my greatest concerns as the Ward 6 councilperson has been coming in here on days when the conversation is not quite as lovely as today. And people who come in a lot know that if we have good conversations in here, I will parrot them to the high heavens. There have been uglier days, and there have been hateful days. And it has affected the ability of any of us to do advocacy on any of the issues that we really have to work on, because almost all of them are external. We have State Highway, we have the Maryland Transit Authority, we have Prince George's County, we have Montgomery County, we have lots of things. And then we have every agency in Maryland that some people in here work at that will tell you suddenly that it's not their responsibility, it's the next agency's responsibility. And then that person will tell you maybe it's someone else. And then months later, while everyone's still employed, we still don't necessarily have an answer. And that's why the most important part of what I feel like I've done in this council and the things that we have tried to do is the advocacy, because that man runs the government. This woman creates the agenda, and we move forward under the premises that we have articulated to everyone for ages, and the information has been available. And so it's always frustrating to me that the presupposition that we are rushing to anything is tinged with, I don't know, an inability to perceive that maybe people know things about these issues, that worked on these issues, maybe read about them because they have to be up here to do it. And I just want to make sure that as we move forward, if there's going to be advocacy on behalf of issues that is in contravention to what we are attempting to do, which is to reason to a conclusion, that we do it in a reasonable way. And so I'll always be bringing books. I'm sorry it took so long.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Let's go ahead and wrap it on up.
Michel de Montaigne, for complete essays. So old dude sat around, thought about things, reminded me, a professor of mine of me. So he sent me this book. And in it are a bunch of essays. This one's called The Art of Conversation. I'm just going to read you a paragraph. To my taste, the most fruitful and most natural exercise of our minds is conversation. I find the practice of it the most delightful activity in our lives. That is why, if I were now obliged to make the choice, I think I would rather lose my sight than my powers of speech or hearing. In the academies, the Athenians, and even more the Romans maintained this exercise in great honor. In our own times, the Italian retained some vestiges of it, greatly to their benefit, as can be seen from a comparison of their intelligence and ours. Studying books has a languid, feeble motion, whereas conversation provides teaching and exercise all at once. If I am sparring with a strong and solid opponent, he will attack me on the flanks, stick his lance at me right and left. His ideas send mine soaring. Rivalry, competitiveness, and glory will drive me and raise me above my own level. In conversation, the most painful quality is perfect harmony. And I say that to say,
Councilmember Small.
we
Thank you,
can't be
Councilmember
doing
Small.
this way
Thank you,
anymore.
Councilmember Small. All right, Councilmember DeBon.
Thank you, Mayor. I, for once, might also run over, but I'll give it a shot. So I have some announcements, and then I wanted to address some of the things that some of you raised, because I've been thinking about them too, and thinking about them a lot, and trying to come up with some ideas. First, announcements. Thank you, David, for mentioning the Long Branch Sligo annual meeting, so I don't have to. Before that, this Sunday, from 1 to 2 in Forest Park, there'll be a chat with the council member. And then for those of you who live in that middle part of Ward 2, north of Forest Park and south of Sligo Creek Park, we're going to schedule a third in that neighborhood somewhere. So that's, if people want to get a hold of me, that's a couple ways to do it. Second, the Street Fest was fabulous. I had a great time. It's what I like about Tacoma Park. Third, last week, the Maryland Municipal League Board was able to go to the old executive branch part of the White House for a federal level briefing, and it was not what you might think, and it was not, sadly, a White House tour. But it was an in-depth briefing on 3 things: cybersecurity, infrastructure monies that are available, including stormwater. Did you hear me say stormwater, Councilmember Gibson? And finally, stormwater, and PFAS and lead pipes, which are the responsibility of our water supplier, but they show up in our taps. So something for us to keep track of. So I want to note that. I wanted to note, thank the city staff for once again, for the Belford sidewalk. People love it. What they don't love is that the stop sign, not the stop signs, the no parking signs on one side of the street are not up yet. And I have understood from Director Braithwaite that they're working on it, and they hope to get the signs in place by early next week. I also want to say that part of the confusion might be because there are 2 blocks, and the no parking, please listen carefully if you're from that neighborhood, because this is tricky. The no parking is different on the 2 blocks. So on the 400 block, no parking on the odd side, odd numbered side. 500 block, no parking on the even side. Right now, we've got people doing what they've always done, and there's not enough room for cars. So if we can, in the meantime, try to adhere to those 2 parking rules till the signs get in, maybe that'll ease the congestion at Prince George's and Belford. Okay, so that was the comments I was gonna make, and now, if you don't mind, I'd like to have another minute or 2 just to say that, again, thank you for those of you who made comments. I've been thinking about a lot of the same things. I believe that the city staff has responses to a lot of these questions, and I hope that they will get addressed tonight during the presentation or during questions. I want to say specifically to Mary Jane Mitsui, because I asked that in the tax credit for deed restricted, the low income, the seniors, et cetera, disability housing, new or renovated, is part of that credit. And I am sure going to make sure it stays there. To the goals, again, I think the city staff can best speak to this, but I think the goal is not, the tax revenue for me is not the driver. For me, it's we need to protect housing, we need to protect renters, we need to preserve the quality of the housing we've got, and we need to expand the housing. That's what our housing plan says, and that's what we've been picking off one by one over the last couple of years, and will continue to do, at least while I'm on the council. To the question of targeting, there'll be a map that will get shown in the presentation, because I asked this question too. And it shows the current zoning for multifamily where these things are allowed, and then the blank is where it's not allowed. And in effect, you will see that's targeting in particular neighborhoods. So I think for me, that addresses the targeting issue. It does steer up to the University, New Hampshire area where the opportunity zone is, which it does include both economic, both businesses and residences, multifamily. And let's see, I could go on because this is most of what I was going to say when we get to the topic. But maybe just one more topic on the Dr. Kraszowski's email, which I also received. It prompted me to follow up on something that I haven't for a while. The county's floodplain analysis and how it applies to Tacoma Park. And I understand from Director Braithwaite that they've had a briefing from the county on how that affects Tacoma Park. And what I would like to suggest, Mayor, is that we ask the county floodplain folks and the city stormwater folks to come in to do a public level briefing, to do that briefing for the council. And I think that'll get at some of, maybe not all, but I think it will. I took some time to play with the maps and report today. I think it'll get at some, but maybe not all of the questions that Dr. Kraszowski raised, and that might be one way to get at it. So sorry to use up my month's worth of talking in one day here, but there was just a lot going on to say. So thank you for your time and your indulgence, and I'm looking forward to the presentation and discussion on the housing issue.
Thank you very much, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. First, on the public hearing, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came out tonight. I think public hearings are a really important time. I wish sometimes that we could see even more people out here, and I'd like to figure out how we can make that happen. So I really appreciate when I hear from people one-on-one too, via email and other pathways than being here today. Mr. Reed, I particularly appreciated some of the comments you made about what I heard was increasing housing density and retail. Investing in retail near public transit hubs. I think, I'm trying to think who it was. There was someone else who commented tonight about Purple Line stations, and I was hearing housing density near Purple Line stations. So I'm going to challenge residents to think about something that's on my mind, which is what has been stopping us from increasing housing density and retail near all of our public transit hubs, and not just the Purple Line stations. That includes our DC Red Line Metro station. We must crack this nut for smart growth to take place in our city. I know these are a lot of our single-family houses. I know that is not an easy thing to do. And I know there's been, I personally have received a lot of calls from Ward 1 residents feeling very strongly about those potential changes. But I am happy to see that those things are slowly changing, and I think all of us are going to have to change with them. And I am ready and open to hear all kinds of suggestions, such as some of the ones that were given today, about how we're going to crack that nut all over the place. Also, I'd like to say thank you to our mayor and our housing manager, Devin McNally. Just this week, but it's been going on for many, many months, we have been working tirelessly to do advocacy for our multifamily buildings, and it's just so important. If you could see what we are seeing, these buildings are in wretched shape. They're not always governed by good managers or owners. The buildings need to be overhauled. They're in terrible condition. It is urgent. And so we don't have time on our side to make decisions that are going to make a difference in our housing quality. I'm definitely interested in fiscal analysis, but I want to see us move towards new smart development and refurbishment sooner than later. I also want to, and now moving on away from housing, I appreciated being able to participate in my first Jewish celebration in my life this past weekend, because neighbors invited me as I was walking down the creek with my family to participate in a Rosh Hashanah celebration. It was really, I can't tell you enough how rich it was for me to be able to share in that. I don't come from a Jewish tradition. I learned a little bit about the New Year. Maybe someone on the dais might be able to tell me, or some in the audience. They blew through a ram's horn, I believe, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was really spectacular and just very moving. And I felt honored to have one of my residents allow us to participate in this moment. And now just a few upcoming events, really important ones. Today was walk and roll to school day. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to ride with my daughter to school, and it would have probably been rather messy going over to where all the Purple Line construction was taking place. But I am grateful to Casey Ann Webley from the city who made resources available, partially upon my request, to all of our schools, but she also reached out to Sims, which hadn't been done before. So thank you, Casey Ann. And tomorrow there will be a Purple Line Community Advisory Team meeting for Long Branch. So please, please, please participate. Those rarely get enough participation. It's at 6 p.m. virtual. On Friday, there will be a Discover Long Branch Kids outdoor movie night, picture show in pupusas. They're showing Monsters, Inc. at Flower Urban Park. Those are a lot of fun if you've never done it. And then just a couple of upcoming things. On October 29th, I have invited the county planners to come and talk about the East Silver Spring Communities Plan virtually. Anybody from the whole city is welcome to join us. On October 29th, my virtual Ward 5 quarterly meeting, I've invited them. They're also doing some other sessions, and I'm sorry I don't have it right in front of me, but feel free to email me if you want to know those. I think there's a couple upcoming at some of our elementary schools around the area. But if you're not aware of what's happening, the East Silver Spring Communities Plan is wrapping around the north side of our city, all around the border, from where Cindy's War begins at the north side up and around the top of the city. And so it's really, really important as all this is happening. So much change. And then finally, a fun thing, if you haven't registered for the Long Branch 5K coming up on November 3rd, it's $35, but it really helps the Long Branch Business League, and you can walk or you can volunteer or you can even donate. So think about joining. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody for coming out, either in person or virtually. I also attended the street festival this weekend, and it was lovely, and I appreciated sharing a tent with some council members. I have a quick dais question for city manager's office. I don't usually ask stuff like this. Was there a city presence at walk and ride to school today at Tacoma Park Elementary School today? And I don't mind if there wasn't.
I'm unsure. But
Okay.
We can check with Casey Ann.
Yeah.
I believe that Casey Ann was at East Silver Spring today, based on the last email I received.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? And I had asked what was happening, and other than that, because there were so many different schools she was trying to serve, she was sharing supplies and resources with the PTA groups from those different schools, is what my
'Cause I just-
understanding.
and
That was my
No,
understanding.
I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
okay. Like, we have a limited number of staff, and I appreciate that sometimes they're going to be at some schools and sometimes they're going to be at others. And so I really appreciate that we as a community have to share the small staff that we have among a couple different schools. And so I can appreciate that sometimes it's going to be at Tacoma Park Elementary School and sometimes it's going to be at a different school. So thank you, staff, for everything that you do, and for sometimes focusing on one school and sometimes focusing on another. That's okay. I am looking forward to the financial analysis on these tax credits, which is expected to be posted next Monday to the city's website, which I have been told is on track. And, you know, I think I'm going to echo some sentiments that you just heard from Councilmember Honzak, that we're experiencing a housing crisis. I mean, it is an emergency to do this. And the developments that we're going to see happen from the tax credits that we are hoping, you know, to figure out, to perfect before we keep going, we're going to see those developments coming from like a mile away. None of these things are fast moving. We will be able to put the brakes on things if we think that we have seen enough development in our future, and our concern right now is that we're going to see anything happen. Also, I appreciate that some people came out this week and they may not be able to come out next week. Please, after that report comes out, email us, as I'm sure that for equity reasons, all of my colleagues will weigh as heavily the email comments that they get as in-person comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. I always say, you know, one of the joys of going last is you don't have to talk as much, although I'm usually not really good at that. Uh, I just want to echo my colleagues' sentiments around the Tacoma Fest this weekend. It was awesome. Special shout out to our city staff. You know, to spend a Sunday, which is typically an off day for folks. And we had Public Works out there, our police department was out there, our sustainability manager, our city managers were out there. And it's just a true testament for how committed our staff is to making sure that we as a community are able to celebrate together, even if it means them sacrificing. City TV was there. Even if it means sacrificing their time with their families and their friends and their time to decompress. So again, I want to give a special thank you to our city staff. Bike to School Day also, thank you. I also want to thank all of the residents that have provided comments. We have been receiving lots of comments this evening, virtual comments and the like, and written comments regarding the housing credits. I do want to take just a little bit of a second because I live in Ward 6. I live right near University Boulevard and was council member for Ward 6 for a very long time. And so when I hear things like, well, let's see what happens with the minor master plan all by itself, I'm going to be honest, I laugh because I sat with the Tacoma Langley sector plan since 2012. Nothing other than a Taco Bell has been built. It was zoned and is zoned for mixed use development, plumb smack in front of the Purple Line station. We've seen nothing. So when I hear things like, well, let's just wait it out. Let's just wait. Let's just see. I get frustrated because we are doing our residents a disservice by not acting now. The number of residents that are in our multifamily buildings on Maple Avenue that want to grow out of their units cannot because there is nothing for them to grow into. Our seniors who want to downsize but stay in the community. They don't want to move out to up there and wherever that is, somewhere I don't like the traffic. Because they can't downsize in our city because we don't have an option. There are no options. You either buy a very expensive single family home or you're lucky, very lucky if you happen to get a unit in our rent stabilized buildings. I cannot tell you how many people came up to me during the Tacoma Fest and asked if I knew where housing was located in the city. Can you point me to an affordable unit? I'm calling around, I cannot find anything. That's the reality. There's nowhere for people to grow. There's nowhere for people who are looking for affordable housing and appreciate our community to be. We haven't had any development since the 80s, and the current stock we have is deplorable. We should be ashamed of ourselves as a city to tout affordable housing when it is in the condition that it is in. We are not doing ourselves any services by continuing to drag our feet instead of acting. That is what we deserve. That is what we owe our residents on Maple Avenue that we speak so fondly of. The ability for them to grow out of poverty and in a structured way, the ability for them to have a place that they would be proud of that isn't plagued with mice, air conditioning not working. We owe it to our residents to act. We started these discussions with the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan in 2019? We've listed housing credits as a council priority, and now we're being told, hey, you're going too fast? No, our residents deserve whatever we need to do to make sure that they can live in decency. That is what we owe our residents. So I'm going to keep pushing. I'm not slowing down. I'm not slowing down. Because at this point, right here, right now, is where we really show where our values lie. So I want to encourage people to come as we continue to have these conversations. I want to encourage you. I agree with you, David, about businesses and incentives. We have grants, we have different programs, but when I talk to the businesses in Ward 6, you want to know what they say to me more than anything? The people. And you know who they're not talking about when they're talking about the people frequenting their businesses? They're not talking about Takoma Park residents. They're talking about the people who are driving through, who don't live in the area, who consider their businesses destinations. We do not patron them. So if we were to have housing on top of them, that would in fact provide an economic source for them in terms of their patrons. Because you know who goes to those businesses? The people who live in the multifamily buildings that are on the Prince George's County side. That's the reality. It's multifaceted, and there are multiple pieces. And this is just one part, the same way MMPA is one piece, the same way our rent stabilization laws are another piece, the same way that our tenant displacement, tenant's first right of refusal, all of those are different pieces of a very complex puzzle that we have to piece together collectively in order to make sure that we're providing high quality housing that is attainable for people who are here now and people who want to be here in the future. So again, I want to encourage you all. Keep those questions coming. Let's keep having this conversation, but we need to act. And act now. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for coming out, for sharing your thoughts. We want that feedback. But I also want to encourage us all to be mindful of how long some of our tenants have already been waiting for us to figure out ways to address some of the challenges that they're experiencing right now. All right, and so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, for city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to the council and our guests. From the Housing and Community Development Department, today the City of Takoma Park's Safe Routes to School program celebrated Walk to School Day with the 5 participating schools: Rolling Terrace Elementary School, East Silver Spring Elementary School, Takoma Park Elementary School, Piney Branch Elementary School, and Takoma Park Middle School. Staff were present at Rolling Terrace and East Silver Spring Elementary. PTA and city staff shared resources to encourage children in Takoma Park to walk and bike to school safely. A thank you to Messiah Bateman, our planning intern, and to Ramon Sola, who is our HCD coordinator, for providing staffing this morning. And thank you to our transit planner, Casey Webley, for organizing this annual event. From the police department, we want to make the community aware of a disturbing trend circulating on social media, specifically TikTok. The door kicking challenge encourages individuals to kick in doors of homes and businesses for social media fame. This dangerous activity poses significant risks to property and personal safety. This trend isn't isolated to Takoma Park. Reports suggest that it's happening in cities across the country. This is a misdemeanor crime under Maryland Statute 6301 and commonly referred to as malicious destruction of property. The penalty depends on the extent and value of the damage and ranges from 60 days in jail and a fine up to $500 to 3 years in jail and a fine up to $2,500. Please remember, if you see suspicious activity in your neighborhood, please immediately report it to the Tacoma Park Police Department at area code 301-270-1100. Always secure your doors and windows and consider installing security measures if you haven't already. Talk to your children about the dangers of participating in such online challenges and the consequences of their actions.
And if you know those kids who are riding around on bikes that people have seen, you should tell them to stop.
And please share this information with your neighbors to ensure everyone is aware of this challenge and can take appropriate precautions. If you witness any incidents related to this challenge or have any information, we encourage you to contact the Tacoma Park Police Department right away. From Public Works, the Tacoma Park Sustainability Manager and Public Works staff will host Sustainable Maryland Certified Communities on a sustainability walking tour this Thursday afternoon. The staff will guide over 25 members representing other Maryland municipalities that are members of the Sustainable Maryland Certified program on a tour of several sustainability features in Tacoma Park. Among the sites visited will be stormwater management facilities, clean energy sites, which feature solar, EV charging, and so on, stream restoration, bike share stations, ecological restoration sites, and local businesses. The tour is currently full, but the department has prepared a self-guided walking tour brochure for residents and others who wish to visit these sites. The brochures are available for pickup in the lobbies of the Community Center, Public Works, and Recreation Center. Please join us in celebrating Walktober and Energy Awareness Month this October and learn more about sustainability in our own backyard. A drawing for energy efficiency prizes is available to those who participate in visiting at least 5 sites. And finally, from the City Manager's Office, this week's staff shout-out is one of welcome to 2 new Public Works employees. Public Works would like to welcome 2 new staff members, both filling long-standing vacancies. Darren Green has been hired as the Building Maintenance Specialist, providing much-needed assistance to our Facility Maintenance Supervisor, Blanca Flores Ramirez, who has been managing all facility maintenance responsibilities single-handedly for quite some time. Also, Stanley Penn has been hired as a sanitation driver, joining our stellar collection service team. So we welcome both of those folks to our family. This concludes the City Manager's report. Happy to answer any questions if you wish.
Thank you very much, City Manager. So we're going to move into our voting session. The only item we have this evening is a resolution approving the FY26 budget schedule. Just want to do a quick check-in with the staff to see whether or not there are any points of discussion or updates.
Mayor, it's outlined in the staff report memo that there were just 2 changes from the last couple of discussions that we've had in the last discussion 2 weeks ago. One is we eliminated the line about the council candidate orientation, as well as we pushed the publishing date of the public budget survey launch to October 16th to give us just a little additional time to get that together. Those are the only changes. Also, the adopted resolution is actually the first time you've seen it before you, very similar to the resolution adopted last year. And I wanted to highlight that overall, this budget is attempting to include additional opportunities for public engagement, fiscal forecasting, budget orientation, onboarding to newly elected council member, and the formalized adoption of budget priorities as council did last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, would someone like to?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second?
Second, discuss.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Are there any points of discussion?
Just one, Mayor.
Yes.
Or I don't know who else has them, but I have.
Oh, hold on, I see a lot of lights, so I just want to make sure. that the- Okay, no, this is actually, I think this is just the council. Yes,
Well,
I think everyone's lights came on at the
I
same
do
time.
have my light on.
Okay, perfect.
You can't see
Thank
it
you.
from that angle.
Thank you so much. Councilmember DeBala is first.
That explains why you didn't call me before you called for the vote. Okay. So last time we talked about this, I think I asked that we add a reference to the overall council priorities. And that we were going to do them and that we were going to do them in January, February as part of this, not as part of this process, but that we were going to do them. And so if I need to propose a whereas, I guess I thought staff was going to put that in there. If I need to propose a whereas, I can come up with something right now.
My turn.
Just to distinguish between, I guess I'm looking for guidance from either the mayor or the deputy city manager.
Yeah, I guess the preference of council with a friendly amendment to add a whereas clause that
Okay.
would include, I guess, a distinction
it would be-
between council
right.
priorities
Yeah.
and budget priorities.
Whereas separately, the city council the new city council will prepare its program and policy priorities. How's that? In the winter or something like that,
So that
as a
the-
friendly amendment,
Yeah,
yes.
the new council would convene, so it's separate and distinct from the budget priorities
Right,
for
would
the
convene
upcoming
to
fiscal
discuss its overall priorities. Okay.
I would think you would put that,
To your
if you were
priorities,
going to
yeah.
do that, you could put that in a resolve clause and just articulate the fact that that is a secondary process. Like notwithstanding any activities regarding this budget calendar, the members of the incoming council will be participating in the budget or in the council priorities work session.
So you would prefer it as a result? I was thinking it didn't.
I don't
need to be.
necessarily think it's necessary because I think that
Okay,
those are
all right.
parallel tracks.
Then I'm
And I
gonna-
thought that was why it didn't end up in here candidly.
Okay.
Hey, thank you, Councilmember Small. I agree. I do think that it's a little, it can get really convoluted really quickly. I kind of like the idea of having one resolution just focused on the budget and then having a separate process for developing the council priorities, recognizing that a future council will need to be responsible for developing the council priorities. I do think that it could be a little, I just think it's cleaner. I think it's cleaner to just have this resolution focused on the budget, its priorities, and the process that we're going to take to develop the budget. And then the council, future council, would be responsible for developing the council priorities, which could then, in that resolution establishing those council priorities, weigh in on whether or not there are any amendments that would need to be made to the council priorities as a result of that.
But that wasn't my thing though. Just so you know.
Councilmember Small, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure you knew that it wasn't necessarily hating on what is a reasonable amendment. It's just,
Right,
I agree
totally.
that they're parallel.
Okay, so
But what I would say,
okay, go ahead.
what I would say about this is though, from the perspective of someone who has some experience with regards to construction of a budget regime, I appreciate the efforts that are being made by the senior staff to make sure that there are actually articulated places where there is value add from hearing from the community as opposed to just hearing from the community.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that hopefully the next council will have an opportunity to think about how they interact with regard to work sessions and other things, and maybe provide more opportunities for collaborative efforts, maybe if not in the room or in other places, but that will be something that they get a chance to talk about. So thank you guys for your efforts is what I was trying to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. And to kind of piggyback off of one of the points that was raised, another reason why kind of outlining when the council priorities will be finalized, it would be beneficial to be able to have that conversation with the new council, right? So the new council may decide that, you know what, we're just going to buckle down and get this thing done because we want to have these priorities outlined before January when the council priorities, budget priorities need to be voted on. So I do want to make sure that we do have a little bit of flexibility for the next council, should they choose to expedite the process for developing the council priorities, which would be potentially it could be before January. So that's another reason why I'm thinking, hey, let's have them clean and have them on separate kind of trains, and then that way you give the new council some flexibility to expedite the council priorities discussion should they choose to.
Does anybody else have a comment on this before
I just would defer to you, Cindy, in
Okay.
terms of what you think.
I think I withdraw my amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala.
I'm sorry, Cindy.
No, I'm taking it out now because y'all are persuasive. Thank you.
My bad.
All right.
Change my mind. You guys changed my mind on some restricted covenant stuff.
Okay. That is how it's supposed to work, debate at the dais.
Bam.
All right. So the motion was moved. Are there any other points of discussions? Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor of adopting the resolution, adopting the FY26 budget calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Do you have any opposed? Do you have any abstain? All right. Thank you so much. And so with that, we're at 9:04. Can I give folks till 9:15? All right, we're going to do a 9:15, back at 9:15 because we can't be here all night. All right, quick 10-minute break. Thanks.
If we're having
city management staff to the dais. Council members, city management staff to the dais. Bring your snacks and your water to the dais. Bring your tea and your coffee to your seat at the dais. All right, let's see. I think we're just missing Councilmember Fulcher. But I think, let me just make sure, last call for council members and city management to the dais. All right, I think we have quorum. We're going to get started. All right, just make sure we're back live on City TV. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your patience as we have a little bit of a break. So now we're going to move to our work session for the evening, and our final item for this evening, the proposed housing tax credits. With that, I will turn things over to our housing manager, Devin McNally, to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Devin McNally here with the Department of Housing and Community Development. So this will be a work session on the tax credits that were introduced as a package July 24th, and then the new rental construction credit, which was introduced in a work session in February of 2024. So I'll quickly go through kind of the high-level overview. I know you've seen a lot of these slides before, so I'll try not to spend too much time on them, starting with the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan, the housing, an overview of the tax credits themselves, and then diving into some of the questions that we've heard in the forum and in kind of the months since that is we have introduced the tax credits. So briefly, this is part of implementing the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan that was adopted in 2019 and sets kind of housing policy for the next 10 years. There were the three goals: preserve, produce, and protect. And so part of that is implementing a wide variety of strategies, including tax credits. And that was developed through a robust public process that included stakeholder interviews, council work sessions, surveys, and public events. So a little bit kind of about the housing context and what we're looking at as staff. So one of the things that we're trying to do is move the needle on multifamily housing construction just writ large. We really haven't seen any multifamily construction in the city since 1980. We do know that there are some housing quality issues, and there's a desire for increased choices in regards to the type of housing that residents would like. We have current policies that are addressing some of these. We have an emergency assistance program. We have our Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs and some tenant displacement ordinances as well that are being implemented today. So where we are today, this is a quick and brief timeline. We started in February of 2024 with a work session on the new rental construction credit, spent some more time and came back with a package of tax credits addressing kind of a wide variety. So that's our package that we have today, which was in July of this year. In August, we put together a web page with a number of different blog posts over that month, detailing a number of pieces about the project itself, kind of common questions around housing development, and then also provided some emails. We have a list of landlords and then tenants who sign up to receive housing updates. And then we followed that up in September with a newsletter article, a public forum on housing and specifically the implementation of the housing plan, social media posts, and some staff work around the proposal. In October, we talked about it on the radio show. We're going to have a fiscal impact analysis, which looks specifically at kind of what this does in terms of a pro forma for housing development, and then also looks at for the impact on revenue over the next 30 years and for the new construction credit. and we're going to have a number of work sessions starting with today with potential adoption later this month. So diving into the tax credits themselves, I'll just briefly say kind of a little bit about why we're doing tax credits. So predictable financial support, and the idea is that we'd like to leverage private investment to get that benefit of additional housing. We also can provide higher subsidies through tax credits than we would ordinarily be able to do with our Housing Reserve Fund and general fund dollars. And it's part of kind of implementing in our housing and economic development strategic plan. So one of the questions that came up is pilots versus tax credit. What is this? So pilots are very simply another way to call the tax credit. It is similarly foregone revenue that we forgive off the tax bill. Previously, we handled pilots on a case-by-case basis. So individually, pilots were brought forward to council for consideration and award. We still have 7 properties who have pilots that are expiring in the next few years. The total current bill is around $60,000 for the year. And so one of the things that we were asked to do was develop a process to equitably evaluate and set consistent criteria for these tax credits. There is one tax credit that we are recommending that we put aside for the moment, and that is the missing middle tax credit proposal. So that was aimed at the development of home ownership opportunities. And the reason for that is there are pending proposals, particularly at the county level, that specifically address missing middle housing and would have direct impacts on where that could be built. And staff would like to have some time, given that the proposal is in a listening session and is likely to come forward in spring 2025 for potential adoption by the county. All right, so jumping into the first tax credit, which is new rental housing. So this has a goal of incentivizing new housing development in the city of all kinds. It's a 15-year tax credit for projects that create 10 or more net new residential units. There is an adjustment for redevelopment. So the idea being that the amount of the credit is scaled and there is no benefit for simply replacing units. What we're trying to incentivize here are new units only. And the way that we're doing that is providing a tax credit in the amount of additional value that you are adding to the parcel. So when the parcel is developed with new housing, there is an increased assessment or value to that property. And so what we want to do is essentially freeze that original tax bill that has that the property owner has been paying for 10 years and then phase that back in over 5 years. So there have been questions around, well, what properties that would this affect? And so the map on the right shows the multifamily zones. I will call out really briefly, it does not show the Washington Adventist Hospital site because that zoning has not been enacted quite yet, but that will be added to the map additionally. This is the current zoning as it stands today. And this includes all of the multifamily zones where such development could occur. Most of these parcels are developed for the most part. What we're looking for is kind of incentivizing on sites that allow for multifamily or might be underutilized, kind of nudging the property owner in the direction and providing a tool for them to consider adding housing to that site. I do want to note really briefly that this would not change any county permitting or approval process. The county has its own development review of which the city takes part, and this tool would not affect that in any way. Our second credit tonight is the Affordable Housing Preservation Credit. And so that is the goal of safeguarding our current provision of affordable housing, particularly in types that are, for example, for low-income individuals, people with disabilities, seniors, and transitional housing. And so it would be for deed restricted, so the regulatory agreement with a government agency such as the state, county, or federal government for that affordability. Essentially, the structure would be that we would give you a tax credit on your tax bill in the amount of the share of units that meet that eligibility criteria with a cap of 50%. So if 50% of your units meet that eligibility criteria, you would get the full tax credit paying half your, we would forego half that tax revenue. A credit would continue as long as the building was under that regulatory agreement. So for as long as that building is providing those units as set forth in that agreement, we would continue the credit. There's a number of different policy options we presented depending on kind of the level of affordability. In all of these, we included senior units or for individuals with disabilities or for transitional housing, but the amount depends on the household income level. So the first row looks at households, rents affordable for households making 30% of the area median income. The next option, the row down, is 50% AMI, and then the one after is 60% AMI. On the far right column, what you see is the estimated annual tax credit. This was put together based on the regulatory agreements that city staff have been able to find for these buildings. And so, for example, in the first row, if we were to provide it for all of the different buildings and that number of units, we'd be estimating that the annual City of Tacoma Park tax credit would be about $100,000. For reference, we currently are providing about $60,000 in tax credits through our pilots currently, so that would be an increase of about $40,000. Our final credit that we're talking about tonight is the Housing Reinvestment Credit. And so this is encouraging proactive investment and upgrades in our multifamily buildings. And so what it would work is a competitive credit for properties of less than 100 units that propose a project that meets the HUD definition of a substantial renovation. So that's $6,500 per unit and does not displace any residents. The way that we're structuring this is the credit would be for 10 years and would be about be 50% of their property tax bill. For buildings that are more than 100 units or more, we would have to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis, purely because there's a larger sum involved in those. The way that we're setting this up is you'll notice that we have a draft ordinance and draft resolution for you guys to review. What we're proposing is that the first two credits, the new rental construction credit and the affordable housing credit, be written in as an ordinance into our code. This one, the housing reinvestment credit, we're proposing be put together as a resolution that staff will go back, develop a competitive program with criteria to implement, and then bring those forward for award. What we're looking for is direction on essentially how much money annually we want to commit to this program. And so these different options represent different funding levels. So option A, the total tax credits we would be offering at any year would be $50,000 or less. So based on that, what we're assuming we can do is about two small buildings every other year, and one medium building every 5 years, and then a large building every 10 years. These sizes of buildings. The more money we devote every year to the program, the more properties we can enroll kind of over a 10-year period. And so that is kind of the different options that are available and the direction we'd be looking for from council. One of the things that we'd like to highlight is the interplay of these credits. So some of these credits can combine to provide greater subsidy for projects that provide multiple benefits for the city. So under the kind of what we're proposing today, the highest value project, that is to say a project that could get 100% off its tax bill, would be an existing affordable housing project that has over half or more of its units meet our eligibility criteria, so they would get 50% off their tax bill, that's conducting a substantial renovation that doesn't displace their tenant. And that would be another 50%. And so under that criteria, they could potentially pay no property taxes for 10 years. Similarly, a new affordable housing project that constructs new additional affordable housing project units could pay half of its reduced tax bill under the new construction credit combined with the affordable housing preservation credit. So there are ways that these tax credits interplay to provide a greater subsidy if we're getting more out of that housing project. A little bit about timeline. We've presented this back in July, in August, September. We've gone through some public comment, a lot of questions that have come in, some staff analysis. We are currently in kind of consideration. We have that fiscal impact analysis, and we're hoping to present that to you next week with the accompanying report. And then if passed, staff would work in this coming winter and early 2025 to develop administrative regulations and a process around it, with the goal of awarding the first round of tax credits in July of 2026. So we've received a lot of great questions over this past month about kind of the tax credits, development kind of writ large. And so we wanted to take a quick chance to kind of address some of them. A lot of questions were about the housing development process. One of the things that I'd like to highlight is that, first of all, this would not change any of these county processes. And previously, the planning department put together a really helpful graphic about kind of how land development works in the county and what process it goes through. And there are different stages for the city to directly weigh in on projects, particularly large projects like multifamily housing projects. Additionally, one of the things that I would like to highlight is what we've heard generally speaking is not only is multifamily housing very difficult to develop and complex and takes years, it has only gotten more difficult in recent years as interest rates have risen and lenders have gotten much more stringent in their underwriting criteria. Almost every single multifamily housing project needs to get outside lending, and those lenders have gotten very, very discerning with how they put their money into that project and need certain guarantees that the project will be successful. We've also heard a lot of great questions about concerns around redevelopment and, what guardrails are put in place. So I'll start with, within the new construction credit, we've built in that adjustment so that the incentive only goes to new units created. We're very sensitive to the idea that we do not want to be incentivizing the tear down of structures and incentivizing them to just simply replace those units. We want additional new units coming to the city. There are other pieces in place, both barriers in terms of policies that the city and the county have put into place, and then looking at the market, also some reasons why staff believe that this will not lead to is not insignificant. And there is generally, once a building is operating and there are residents in there, the goal of most property owners is to keep that going and maintain the property as long as possible. Similarly, we also have policies and programs designed to provide tenants with rights and options. So starting with our tenant opportunity to purchase law and accompanying program that helps tenants, when a building is up for sale to a potential developer, exercise their rights to either buy the building themselves and turn it into a condominium or a co-op, or assign their rights to another provider of housing who might purchase the building with that assignment of rights and invest in it in terms of additional solar on the roof, new building systems, that sort of thing. And we've seen that happen in the past, for example, with Hampshire Towers. Additionally, the county has a displacement law that sets forth very strict timelines of notification and potential payouts for substantial rehabilitation and demolition. And so those are other tools and rights that are available to tenants. Additionally, many of our multifamily properties in the city have deed restrictions on them currently that require that they be used for affordable housing. So this is done through state and federal funding programs that require that those continue to be operated as affordable housing. Additionally, we are very lucky to have a number of nonprofit affordable housing providers who operate in the city and own a significant number of units. And their mission primarily is to provide affordable housing. And so they are not as market motivated, and their mission is to provide that affordable housing for the long term. Another number of questions that have been raised about increased city costs. And there are a few different ways that we work to make sure that the additional costs created by the development are paid for or minimized. So one starts with development review at the county level, which has a review of potential impacts. So this includes roadways, parks, and other public facilities. And so large projects are required to provide public benefits through the county's development review process. And they also have to pay impact fees related to schools and roads. We also receive money back from the county through our tax duplication agreement for services that we provide instead of the county. And so there is a formula that is calculated based on that. And then finally, housing also pays city fees for city provided services. So for example, every single rental housing unit pays an annual or biannual licensing fee to go towards, for example, paying our inspectors who inspect the buildings. They also have to pay stormwater management fees, and if they have their trash collected by the city, they have to pay for trash collection as well. So there's a whole lot of information, and so we've tried to, as much as possible, put as much on the website. So that includes a specific web page and accompanying blogs about the tax credit. And then we also have a web page about the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan. So I would encourage, if you have, lots of questions or would like to learn more, there's a lot of great information up there. We have an amazing communications team that helps our staff keep it updated. And so if you would like to learn more, I really encourage you. And so with that, I will answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. McNally, because I know how much work you have been putting into these proposals and communicating, answering questions. I just got to the point where I print out all of your memos and I just have all the books. Which helps me to kind of think through things. I do have a couple of quick questions, if it's possible. So one thing that did come to mind for me as I was thinking through all the different efforts that were already underway, the Housing Fund. So the idea that reserve still and are there any use case for the Housing Reserve Fund as part of this initiative, or are these completely separate?
So I would say that these are separate. The Housing Reserve Fund we use for potentially housing projects. Generally speaking, we're aiming at affordability, like deep affordability. We also use it for homeschool program. So it well, and also for our family building program. Programs dollars out of the reserve fund, and it is a limited pool. We're very lucky to have money put into it every year, but there's a lot of demand for those dollars.
Yeah, and that's really helpful because it's a slightly different use. This is incentive development. This is the service actually get more to this. And the one thing that came up for me, through the new construction benefit requirements, and I know that's part of the development process, but can you just remind folks that about public benefit when a project comes before the planning board and ready always occurs at what stage, so when financing public benefit will help to do other things as a process.
Yeah, and what I'll say is I am not an expert on the county planning process. Happy to reach out to the county and have them come in and present on it. My limited understanding of it is there is a development review committee that starts with it, and so there's a number of people sit on it representing different public facilities, and they're looking at what you have someone looking at roadways, so that would be like a traffic. You have someone who is looking at affordable housing, someone from the county's Department of Housing and Community Affairs, for example. And they spend a lot of time kind of kicking the tires on that and evaluating that. There's also a whole point system, so projects that are multifamily provide public benefit and different benefits such as park, roadway improvement, sidewalk, I'm an expert on. Happy to work to get that information out.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And the only reason I bring that up is because a lot of times when we're talking about this particular piece of the puzzle, and I mentioned earlier, you have all of these different pieces, and all of them have to fit together. But each has its own little window of the world. People speak about the negative impact of these credits are so incentivized. Affordable housing preservation, but there are other parts of the process that also have its own set of rules that also work towards incentivizing certain types of behaviors from the developers. And I just think that's something important for people to understand. And then the last question that I have, everybody has their lights. The reinvestment and the competitive of it, a little bit more about how you envision that process in terms of the competition. Is it does it function kind of like a grant application? Is it a first come, first serve? Is it, hey, you have to meet certain criteria in order for to be eligible?
You're talking about number 3.
Number 3.
So the goal would be something similar to a grant application, where it is everyone gets their application so that we have time to sit down, evaluate all the applications, and there will be a baseline control. So starting with, it's got to be at least $6,500 per unit. So we don't want to see someone coming in and saying, I just want to put in a new boiler. That's not good enough. And similarly, you have to be, you work to residents. So that'll be an affidavit that follow through with that. We're going to get money back. The criteria, what we've been thinking, all the minimum threshold, right? But if you're going above and beyond, let's give you more points. I think affordability is another key part. So one of the things that we have is with rent stabilization, we have a number of what would be market rate properties that are very low units as defined by HUD's standards. So rents that would be affordable to 50% of the median income. And so giving points to those kind of specific properties if their rents are significantly lower than the market. There are also points for potentially project size. So if you're, in the medium building category, but you're one of the larger medium buildings, we want to have a greater impact. And work on those at the top. We can see those.
Thank you so much, because there's the concept of just giving away the house and and for residents to understand that there's 2 by right options, 1 not by right? And that's this third option where there are criteria, there is a more thorough review, and you're not just entitled to get this additional credit. And then for the affordable housing option, there's a strong focus on affordability and preserving our affordable housing stock. So the only one that's by right, it's really just trying to incentivize new housing, which is the new construction tax credit program. So I do think that I'm just reinforcing that, because I think that we're kind of hearing lots of things on the street, and it's important for folks to kind of understand conceptually how each tax credit has a different purpose, and each tax credit definitely be able to access the resource. Thank you so much. Member Dabala.
Yeah, great. Couple of general comments and questions, and then going in order. Oh, yeah, I want to go 4, 3, 2, 1, not 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's a reason for that. So overall, we talked about where, with or without the minor master plan zoning amendment, where it would take effect, where would to be able to now, essentially, and where it's not, which is most of the city. Okay, so on 4, for targeting middle income housing, the 4 that I understand why we want to wait and see what the county and state landscape looks like and whether that map expands. I understand, I want to make sure I've got this right. So most of the city is single family. You can't do duplexes for 6, 8 smaller missing middle type stuff in most of the city.
Correct.
You could do it on R40, but we don't have a lot of R40. So my first idea was, well, let's do 4 and let's just get started and do it in R4, but there's just not enough land. And I say this to number one that I ask about whether we might try, whether we might consider targeting that in some way. Okay, so that's 4. And the goals of each, the goal on 3 is clear. It depends on how much we put into it. If it does a year, we get a certain amount of results. Put up, we get 3 times as much result. So, so it might be a little low, because I see that as did I have a question on 3? I think I did. Hang on. While I'm looking, when you said that these would take effect July 2026, if we stay on the current schedule, they take effect when there's a building that's already and has a unit that's at an occupancy limit. Not only we have to be ready, but they have to be.
Correct. So you're talking about the new construction credit, correct?
Yeah, I guess I am. I'm talking about all 3 of them, but I guess that's the only one that applies to.
Yeah. So the idea would be is that they don't start receiving the benefit of a new rental construction credit until they have completed the building. So,
And on the other 2, they apply to existing buildings, essentially.
correct.
So sooner going, I guess where I'm going with this, I do see based, if nothing else, on how long it takes to set up a program like this.
And so that's part of the reason why is the next steps that we have to do is go in, develop administrative regulations, which take the ordinance and turn it into kind of a detailed process, release those for public comment. That takes, a few months. And then we also have to start working with the county to make sure that we are giving them the correct information so that it shows up on those property tax bills. So even though it gets past October 2024, it's still going to take us a fair amount of time to put it all together.
Right. Okay. And so going from 4 to 3 to 2. So 2 is the Affordable Housing Preservation Credit, which is a variant on what we used to call pilots. This makes sense to me. I do have a couple of specific questions. Right now, we have 7 current pilots still in effect. Are they all at the 30 mile level, or are they all over the board?
So they are all deed restricted affordable housing, but they are not 30%.
Right. Okay. So to the question of goal, again, the goal is to some degree up to us. If we wanted to do essentially every affordable housing, deed restricted housing property in the city, if I understand this correctly, then we'd be talking about the 3rd column, the 21 buildings.
Yes. Yeah.
60% are senior or disabled, and right, and that would be foregone tax revenue.
Correct.
Of 257,000 compared to 60 now. So my second question is, at one point we had a whole lot more pilots not too long ago. What was that like? Was that more like $150,000 or $250,000 in credits revenue we were already foregoing at that point?
Yes.
I was trying to get a scale.
Yeah. So the past 10 years, the maximum foregone tax revenue that we had was about $104,000
a year.
A year.
Okay, thank you. So 3, 2, just keeping going. That's it on 2. On 1, new construction. One that seems to have the most interest, although I think the others are all very important as well. I was trying to think through in my mind whether it would be possible to make some adjustments, as he does, because I talked to you, but nobody else does. adjustments to the details to see if we could bring some of this foregone revenue on board sooner. I was also wondering about whether, I'm not sure if it is, whether it would be feasible, whether it would be to essentially focus that on middle income housing. And when we talked yesterday, we talked about the difference between what the cutoff for MPDUs is some percent of income versus what all income level, which would be something like 120% of area median income. So the concept, and again, I'm putting this out there, I don't know if I like it myself, is what if we had, just in case, there's someone out there that wants to build luxury apartments at this price, we want to subsidize that. So what would that look like? And so you said to me that what it would look like is to have a limit on the AMU. So what I want to ask you, though, is because then you said that, so two of you said that you didn't think it's a good idea because we not welcome everybody. And more to the point, if I understood you correctly, in 5 years, that developer knows that in 5 years they're going to be under rent control, and it's likely they're going to be able to keep raising those. So, you walk through that? Why you think it might apply to all rather than some subset of possible theoretical development, new unit construction? Because I think you'll agree it applies to the low end, applies to the middle end, so that just leaves the upper end. So could you walk us through that thinking again?
Yeah, so I'll start with talking about what our current housing context is.
Thank you.
So we have about 13 units, about 1,600 are under rent stabilization, and another 1,300 to 1,400 are deed restricted affordable housing. So the deed restricted affordable housing, most of those units, by their regulatory contract agreements, to be affordable 80% or below. When we look at our rent stabilized units, 93% of those would qualify as what are called very low income units, so rents affordable to 50% or below. And so what that means is north of 80% of rental units are tax units in the city are affordable housing units for low income individuals. We do not have a lot of rental units for any of that. And so one of the challenging pieces is that since we haven't built any new apartments over the past 40 years, is that those are aging units. And we see that in the number of violations that we get from our and we in terms of just the increasing cost of having to maintain. And so part of kind of why we are advocating, building and incentivizing new housing construction is it is the affordable housing 10, 20 years down the line. You put the pipeline and as the building ages, it does become more affordable, and we get additional units into our rent stabilization ordinance that become long-term homes for renters who are moving to the city.
So you're thinking 15 years out from now? What did I?
No.
So, so that was something I was wondering about, because I'm, I think I'm tending to think about right now, but the idea that they will get into the stream and at some point, these very old buildings, at some point, yeah. much as I would like to reuse them, I love that the allow that to happen. I think that's just great. So then I want to just put a couple more thoughts out on the table, and then I'm done. So I also asked about whether, because I had talked to several housing experts of my own that I know, and the suggestion that came from them was, did we really have to go past the 10 years? We're talking about number one. Very nice if you want to fix it down, but given the way that family building finance generally 10 years picture, and I'm just about as a possibility, then that 11th year we start seeing the revenue, and by then they're in the rent control, rent stabilization system. Their rents are starting to level off, and it starts to be like before a little faster. I also wonder how we build in a 5-year evaluation into the ordinance or the resolution. I forget where it should go. We'll figure that out later. But to make sure future councils that yes, you're going to come back with the annual housing. You said you come every year, build some kind of let's just this is what we want question. So those are my ideas, and I'll shush up because I've been talking way too long tonight. And let you decide if.
So just want to quickly just follow Councilmember Dabala. So speaking of a formal evaluation after 5 years, I would actually would have a report on after 5.
I didn't mean a formal outside evaluation. I meant a point in time where staff come back and don't just report on them on how much money went out, but also report on what we got for it and how it's working.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be able to, and I defer to staff to take note of it, but I don't we necessarily be able to report out on what we got within 5, especially if the first round, depending on how we shake out, wouldn't end until like 10 to 15 years post award.
Right.
So again, something that we can definitely through if we're looking for a full assessment. Now, if you're trying to think through like preliminarily, like following up with developers who either decide not to build or who decide to build to see whether or not, yeah, that was thing that was actually a factor in my decision to build. Yeah, able to do that. But in terms of assessing the true financial impact of these credits after 5, no.
Okay, well, we can kick that around. Just trying to find some way to mark that we will ask the question, has the market changed? Do we want to tweak this some?
You know, refer to staff, but I feel like this is something a very slow burn, and quite frankly, when we actually start thinking about something like a new construction, the amount of money that we're talking about seems big to us, but tiny to big. So I'm sure that we're to
I had that thought about the 6,500 also.
Yeah.
In the program.
Madam-
So I just wanted to just also tell quickly the goals for the first program. It was 200 units a year.
That's our goal. Yes.
200 units a year.
200 units.
Sorry.
one second. City Manager DeSpirito.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate the comments. I would add, I think part of what you're trying to get at is get some indication as early as possible whether this tool, and most likely in combination with other things, because I don't think it would stand alone. It might be a little hard to isolate, hey, was this the sole factor to result in X? X number of, say, building starts, that sort of. But nevertheless, what we do is data together, such as it is that we have on an annual basis, and put it into the annual housing report, and make sure that on an ongoing basis, this would be part of the metrics we track and report on a regular basis to, like, hey, now, tough thing, you know, and it might have to be based on some, you know, frankly, if there's a project and, you know, interview the developer and say, what were the factors that caused you to decide to invest here versus somewhere else? And it most likely will be a combination of things, but it's also not just a decision not of the developer, it's more of a decision of the financial partner, because that's ultimately whose attention the developer is trying to get with tools like these. It's getting the financing. And that is a part, but that too is information we could try to glean and share with the mayor and council and the public.
So sorry, Councilmember Gibson.
Actually, gosh, there's so many different directions to go. I would like to first ask a softball question in terms of the second, the affordable housing preservation with deed financed, or deed restricted. Question for the tech, whether it's pilots or whether it's with the tax credits. What are they to do for that? I mean, in other words, unlike number 3, where you have to, you know, be building, or number 1, where you have to be building something new, or number 3, where you have to actually be improving. What is the expectation, either for the previous pilot or with the proposal here, that would be done differently than they're doing now?
So the answer is they would continue to operate their affordable housing. So they operate their unit under a regulatory agreement to provide below market rents, essentially. And so the way they would demonstrate it to us is similar to actually how they asked to be exempt from a rent stabilization ordinance. They provide a copy of the they make sure, we ensure that, yep, that says exactly what they're claiming it says. And then they would, you know, get that tax credit, and we would annually monitor to make sure that it's still in compliance with their affordability agreement, and that.
Thank you. So I get they maintain their current operations within the requirements. There's no expectation that they would improve anything, because we talked about decrepit. I forget the word used. Decrepit structures. And, is there? I mean, what's the incentive for them to improve? Whether it's their HVAC system, whether it's their elevators, whether, you know, all the multiple things that can go wrong.
Devin, I think it's important to highlight the fact and to elaborate on this, that we have.
Correct.
And if you could speak a little bit to why those requests are coming in, I think that'll get to some degree at Councilmember Gibson's question.
Yeah, so we have affordable housing providers who have approached the city to request pilots several times over the past couple of years. And I'll give you what this is partially why we included it, is they would, you know, if they're standing up here today talking to you, they would tell you that they are accepting below rate to operate a that has so luxury or affordable has about the same cost, and that with COVID-19, a lot of the apartment markets have turned upside down, and that they are facing significant headwinds in terms of lack of payment of rent, of increasing staff costs, and increasing costs to do the maintenance that they were doing before. all of that said is, they are not the only ones who tell us that, but
Right.
that is part of one thing that they said.
Okay, well, I understand that in the press. I just wanted to clarify that this does not address the or many of the issues that have been raised here. I'm favorably I'm in favor of doing what we can to help the buildings and the residents that they serve. There's also for us to incentivize and than status quo.
That is, though, a different tax credit. So the preservation tax credit.
The preservation,
is
which
meant
is
to-
available to them as well as to the for commercial folks as well.
So we have, Devin mentioned that
Yeah.
not long ago, there was $114,000 worth of that the city was supporting. And so to his point, those developers are the same developers that are knocking on the city's door requesting pilots for the reasons that he suggested. And so we in particular, those developers are still looking for this facility. So part of the rationale for that particular tax credit is to provide some level of transparency so that those requests aren't as ad hoc as they had been, but to provide this programmatic way of telling the that this is what the city is offering and in order to receive it.
Okay.
If I could, please, I think again, the emphasis is on preservation, and there's certainly a loss. We've certainly seen it with other cities as these affordable housing providers face their challenges. The shrinkage of affordable housing. There's ones that fail. There's ones that sell, and the next owner is doing condos or market and above. Preservation in and of itself is a very important goal. When in Rockville, we did hang on to some of the affordable housing that we had. That's right of first refusal when a affordable or naturally occurring or otherwise affordable housing development was on the market, usually because it was failing they weren't getting and they were struggling with a lot of expense on a making building. They would be in the position of having to put it on the market, and we would step in with our housing agency in the city and partners, and literally law would have the right of to continue to operate it as affordable, i.e. affordable housing preservation. So just the preservation alone, that piece alone is huge. But I would also say, and from my own experience, I would see that when the incentive tax credit certainly does not that degree in building and do some improvements, because without that, they've got almost no chance putting money into their building, and a high risk of losing that affordable housing to begin with. Two really bad things. Kind of you get preserved and some marginal ability, and they've traditionally had to reinvest in their building, at least keep it up to code and try and do the things that they probably really want to do before.
Thank you. To be clear, I was not against this. Just to clarify, that there are some new energy requirements that the county is going to be requiring, and so that would have to be handled separately than this. The vulnerable populations, our low and moderate income, are my first priority. So let me shift then to at least one other question or concern with regard to the first option is seriously housing, new construction housing. What I wish we could have some common or some consistent language with some of these things. But the point was raised in the think it's the housing reinvestment that could happen if there's no displacement. Is that correct?
The reinvestment credit requires to be eligible for the credit
Right.
that they not displace
Yeah,
residents.
right. Okay. So my question is, why can we not put a criteria eligibility that no unit is placed in our first option, which is new rental construction?
Because it's
No, these are that's
So
new
so
construction
it-
does not have, as I read this, does not have any requirement that there be no permanent.
So the way the credit is structured
It's
is
for
that
it's for additional units. I understand.
correct.
Yes.
And so you don't get any credit benefit for the replacement of units, which would be that displacement that you're referring to. And the way the credit is structured is that it doesn't incentivize, and you wouldn't get any benefit for those replaced units.
I understand, but we couldn't put in this that you have no disincentives. And so I was wanting to put it as an eligibility factor that would not displace permanently. Is that a possibility? Even if you could consider that the incentives are to do one thing, I want to make sure that we're not way that could be some displacement, unintentional, and it may actually be a net gain for the investor or for the developer to do that, to tear down the three-story building and build a 12-story building, for example. And more units, they would get more units, but they would tear down this three-story apartment. And that's a real. I mean, that's a potential that I want to foreclose or eliminate from happening.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because I'm trying to make sure that I understand, and so forgive me if I'm reading back. So the new construction, is that what we're calling it?
The new rental construction.
New construction. Number one is, in theory, only incentivizing new, which means now tear down a 3-story, build a 12.
Right.
But they're not getting the credit off of the units that were a part of the 3. They would only get the credit on the new units created.
Understood.
So in theory, because based on the new, it wouldn't necessarily displace someone, but I see your point in terms of making that clear. I'm not exactly sure if is thing to be noted as a or could it be, making it clear in terms of the policy, the goal of the policy is to ensure that we are incentivizing new housing creation and our goal is not displace.
I think we could write it in a way.
I'll talk a little bit about kind of process of this, because I think it might help clarify that discussion a little bit.
Sure.
So one of the things that we have to do when we talk about new units in units is when are we talking about? So what we said in the ordinance, the draft, which is, it is a draft resolution or a draft ordinance, is that it's the maximum of the past 3 years. And we can look back at our licensing data and say, okay, there were, in the past 3 years, the maximum on the site was 20. The piece that, and the unintended consequence that I could think of with this is, if we set a date, there you know, for the last 5 years, then you're setting a very specific time window that a developer is going to consider, right? And how do you set that time window? Because you also don't want to let there for years and years. You want, if they're going to do something. I also want to bring attention to the interplay of additional policies outside of this tool that include the tenant opportunity to purchase and county's displacement ordinance. And so the incentive is you don't do anything for knocking down that building. We certainly don't want to incentivize people to run buildings into the ground or tear them down, let them sit for years on end to try to work around the system. Instead, what we're doing is providing carrots and using our other policies to set that kind of date. In conjunction, encourage positive reinvestment as opposed to a tear down rebuild.
I understand, and I would still challenge you if there is there isn't any, but make absolutely clear with their value, or that there would be no credits if there was permanent displacement.
And Councilmember Gibson, and this goes for all of our colleagues, staff has provided a draft, encourage people to read the draft, and if there are specific points that you would like for staff to consider in terms of language, to please make note of that and submit that. And so thank you so much, Devin, for reminding me, because I'm like, no, I did read that in the actual ordinance where we call out aspects of the county law, things like that. I want to remind colleagues that you're diligent. You review, submit, provide your written feedback or markup.
And Mayor, if I could add, and if you could clarify, I think the staff be helpful to staff if we understood if a suggestion was a suggestion from a individual council member or a date from council to get changed in the draft ordinance. Majority decision.
I appreciate that.
I'm making a recommendation, suggestion one, that we at least look at the language, no display in the.
What Deputy City Manager Eubanks is highlighting, we're at the point now, and I want to remind my colleagues about the process. So right now, the question before council is whether or not we are approving moving forward with the credits and the terms. That there are administrative regs and things that will need to be developed, as was discussed earlier, that will provide some additional time for council to make this council or a future council some nuance. Our goal should to provide an agreed upon path, agreed to by council in terms of what we want to make sure is present in terms of the criteria for the credits. So at this point, again, I want to encourage and be looking for, as we're going Dr. asking for hand votes to make sure this are the majority of council's views on a matter, because I don't want us having staff to continue to spin their wheels, that frankly isn't agreed upon by the majority of council. I want to do your in terms of reviewing the ordinance. Remember,
can I go next? No.
Jason, you turned off your lights and then Terry skipped you.
I did not.
You're now back. You're
this conspiracy.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I have a question about the interplay between housing credits and code enforcement. Because if you're thinking about how we're going through these buildings, the buildings that we're working, there are some buildings like within Tacoma Park on the list of bad buildings from the county. So, can you explain the interplay between incentivizing people to make some of these additional remedies available at the same time as you're dealing with the population of potential takers, doing the landlord-tenant consideration, which is just, it has to look the same as it did when I bought it. So, like, how is all that?
It's a great question. I think the criteria is, you know, say, let's call it citations, because there, you know, multifamily buildings, there's always going to be issues around pests. There's always going to be, you know, when code inspectors go into an aging building, they are going to find things wrong.
Yeah.
It's how responsive really is the property owner in correcting those, and does code enforcement have to take more coercive measures to ensure compliance?
So is there, so potentially then, at the rehab level, there may be some need to consider that interplay where enforcement says, no, we should give them no money for what they're, that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's language in the existing ordinance that does speak to that.
Yes, there's essentially the ability to suspend or revoke a tax credit based on the ability to follow state, federal, county laws. And that's pretty typical in any sort of award that we give out in the HCD department.
I guess my only point is that the flow chart of A to B to C to D on any given thing is not necessarily as structured as correct. And so I was just trying to make sure that we did have a conversation about this could even incentivize some lower concern landlords to get off the schneid if they were to do it effectively.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Seaman.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for this presentation. It's long overdue, and appreciate the work you put into this. Just trying to put this in perspective in relation to the kind of current situation. You made a couple of hypotheticals for the apartment owners, one incurring excessive increases in costs because of and other things. And my understanding of the rent program we have now is there are provisions in that to allow for relief from those increased expenses. And so I'd like to know why that's not sufficient, or you know, why we need tax cuts as a solution for this going forward.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there is the fair return petition, which does exist currently for rent stabilized properties. What I will tell you that property owners to me is that it is requires them to submit 3 years of a lot of documentation of not only expenses that they've incurred in terms of maintenance, but any sort of administrative costs. And they often complain that is a burden for them. It is a process that we do offer, and we encourage landlords whenever they come to us with these complaints to use that process. We have a contract with a rents analyst, so it's an objective analysis of what they're spending, what they're paying, and what they're past of kind of adjusting to reason maintenance of net operating income over time so that they're not necessarily losing money as their costs.
And I think I appreciate, and personally not so concerned that it's owner, the property owners, you know, that's part of their business, doing business, and but I think the key thing to me is that what happens at the end of that process is that we then increase but the rent stabilized rate is, so that it's the tenants are being affected in it in a different way, and this you know, the tax credit would
correct.
And that's the point I would make.
The important things, if you could elaborate on this, is the fact that that process is retroactive. And I think one of the things that we're trying to assist with is the ability for a owner to organize their financing. And so if you could speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah. So to David's point, what we're trying to do with our reinvestment tax credit is get owners out ahead. So similar, I'll take a quick second to also plug our multifamily building improvement grant. The goal of that program is to not only replace your boiler, but move to something that is sustainable, that is decarbonization. So what we're trying to do with the reinvestment credit is we want proactive investment. We don't want, I've come in because my roof has fallen in and I need to repair my roof. That's not what this credit is designed to do. Not how we'll. The goal is to get owners moving towards actual planning, actual kind of scheduling of, hey, we're going to do this repair, we're going to upgrade. Because what we tend to see a lot of times is essentially wait until it breaks to fix it.
Well, and if I may, just rush to fix it, but then it's try to get financing so I can fix it, because the lending institutions are not supportive of the plan the way we do it now. And I'm not suggesting that we do it with rent stabilization, but I do suggest that maybe there's some things as we look forward and move forward, we do things in a better way.
That's exactly right. So
The same goal of affordable housing.
yeah. So and to Devin's point, that's exactly what we're trying to solve for. In order for a owner to get a substantial project financed, they need to show that they can justify the added cost of that debt service with some increase in rents. And so because they can't prove that via the current process, they can't show that they'll increase rents because those rents are subject to CPI adjustments. Makes it very challenging. Current process makes it very challenging for them to obtain that financing, and this tax credit, to a large degree, solves exactly that issue. Thank you for pointing that out.
And I just like to say, I also find it very frustrating that there are some residents at Tacoma Park going through and scaring the apartment dwellers that they're going to be thrown out of their apartments, that we're not going to worry about displacement, and that we're doing away with their low rent, and you know, that we have more housing, maybe the buildings that are affordable, but we have a mix of money so that we have not only more housing, but we also have the ability to have more of the affordable units and be able to help more lower income at the same time, sustainable, and so we can have right now, if you have a building that's all low income, it's not led to people in our community is has put a lot of low-income people in a pocket of Tacoma Park.
Louder. Well
And-
done, Terry.
And we need to be thinking about integration. I mean, this is an old term that we used to use back in the day, you know, that we look for. Anyways, I'll let you go. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well said, sir. Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you. Are the deed restricted apartments receiving highlight pilots on their Montgomery County taxes that are here in Park? I know that a lot of them are getting pilots outside of Tacoma Park, but is it generally that they're already getting them in Tacoma Park on their Montgomery County taxes?
Correct. So deed restricted properties in Montgomery County are eligible for 100% pilot.
And when did that pilot in Montgomery County?
When the deed restriction expires.
And then in the past, I'm just looking at this chart you have for the pilots, 30, 50, 60. And I do understand pilots haven't had a lot of structure in the past. Have they been typically affecting any of these groups? Like, has it usually been the 30? Has it usually been 50? Has it usually been the 60? Or been kind of all over the place?
So typically, housing development is a range of different units, but primarily clustered between 50% AMI and 65% AMI. And that's partially because that is kind of how the math works out. And also how regulations were set up in the early days of the LIHTC program. Nowadays, there are they've tried to be more flexible to allow for more what are called extremely low income units, which are the 30% AMI units. But to be quite honest, rents are extremely low, and it becomes very difficult to offer more than a handful at any project.
Okay. And we were talking about that the last program, you need to be spending $6,500 per unit, and so it makes sense that there might be a program where if you don't necessarily need $6,500 per unit, you would be able to use the money to reinvest in the apartments from the second thing that we're talking about, from the affordable housing preservation credit, right? Like, we're capping the program at an A, B, or C, and so everybody's gonna be able to, but it's a little more open, and it will allow them to be able to do small changes to those the other more changes to the apartments.
So the affordable, if you're talking about credit to the affordable housing one, as long as they're operating under a deed restriction, they would be eligible. There are rules that they the way it's written. The reinvestment credit requires that investment. So theoretically, a affordable housing building could, apply for the reinvestment credit to get an additional tax credit. That I'm going to build a building, Parkview Towers, for example, could get 50% credit for operating affordable housing, and then they come in and they say, we're ready. We're going to, do that big change that we've talked about doing. We're going to do that massive renovation. We're not going to displace anyone. We're going to do that. Can we get the, in the other 50% for paying Tacoma Park property taxes? So there are ways that they could interplay. But yeah, the second tax credit, that affordable housing preservation tax credit, doesn't have any investment requirements or ability requirements.
Okay. Then just Spirito. I know that you have been very invested in our budgeting process, and that I have to assume that if you thought the process was going to take us a while out in our budget, not be calmly as the staff is proposing this. And so, how are you viewing, all of this in our plan to be, moving in a better direction schooly?
Thank you, and I appreciate the question. I would put it this way. I don't see this tool costing the city money. I see it as one tools, and your rezone was enough, and we have incentives that we can offer as a city. We provide as a way to build. We're trying to catalyze some construction or rehabilitation of housing. Construction of new housing because it increases the house, particularly in situations. And a component of that is affordable because it's required by mayor and council policy. So that's all upside. That's all good. The cost, as it's been referred to, is really a deferral of brand new revenue, not cutting into any existing revenue that the city receives. This would be net new and a deferral of a patience on our part in order to get something going. Because in the absence of this, only look at the last 40 years to see what inaction, and I say it respectfully, but the fact that there has not been investment here, to me, professionally, would naturally call for economic development incentives in order to turn that around and try to get to the goals that the mayor and council have previously and currently established with respect to housing, which is to try to increase the housing stock so that we have homes for folks that want to come live in this community. We have the ability to, when certain buildings will ultimately age out and have to be replaced, don't meet code, that they are replaced with, affordable, decent, new housing. And as the mayor indicated, there's different types of housing that folks can't find in this community. Getting seniors that want to downsize later years in life, they have moved on and to a smaller place. Maybe they want a fixed income afford a place. Where is that place? We don't have many of those places. This tool gets to our ability to address that. Ultimately, it improves our budget picture. It doesn't hurt. It improves because ultimately there's new revenue that will come. It's a long-term investment. Should that term be 10 years? Should it be 15 years? That can be debated. But the absence of a tool like this, which is only, I would say, is most effective in tandem with other things that we do. We're promoting this community. How do we present Tacoma Park to the world, not just the development community, but to the world? It's a desirable place. We have an extremely high quality of life here, and so many attractions and amenities, and just an amazing, population. It's diverse, educated, multicultural, as very engaged with their local government. These are all great things. To a business, to a developer, the challenge hasn't really been a lack of infill opportunities. It's been, and they're telling me, and I've interviewed others who have, some who are here and some who have not come here and have steered clear of here. And what they said is that it's not a lack of desire to be here, because this is a quality community. Fine. Okay. It isn't about their profit margin on rents. Okay. That's not what the tax credits, this isn't in that respect, a subsidy for a developer. What it is when you have incentive place like this, that back work when they're sitting down with their financier, with the bankers. Okay, these projects don't happen anywhere, and I can attest to that from other cities and other states. They don't happen unless the banks ultimately think that there is in the balance sheets a project that they don't think is too risky. And when they see that there's a partner like like the city who is offering, in essence, help invest in housing and affordable housing, but in the project, then there's some initial front end lower cost to a developer so that they can, because they're going to be taking out extremely low loans and they're going to have to capitalize the project, take a lot of risk, a lot of guarantees, and they got to operate and maintain everything else, and that's all costly. What do the bankers look for when they know that a developer's got to pull all of that off? Well, they're going to look for some cost participation, and they're looking for some lower costs. And like a tax credit is one of those tools in the toolbox. It's not the only one. And the other, zoning. This mayor and council has not passed in the area. And say zoning, the ability to have different than previously existed. Maybe density types, maybe it's now mixed use as opposed to simply single family that was there before. Ultimately, that was a policy decision by the elected representatives of the people, and that is and yet that too helps lay the groundwork for feasible project. Okay, developer's going to say, well, I could do something that isn't just one thing. Perhaps maybe they do want to do just housing. Perhaps they want to be a commercial component, and all of through the county, and ultimately the costs that I sometimes hear associated with tax credits when we talk about, and I think it is a responsible thing to think of that, to think about national policing and work events. Those tackled, and they get tackled thoroughly at the site plan review stage by the city and the county. And there's many tools, different tools in that box that developers can tap for variance on getting the project sizing types, utilities, underground utilities, if it's road improvements, if it's adding a traffic signal, or other, if it was mentioned earlier, also parking, a number of things that the community, those are ways the private sector can ultimately pay the freight for a lot of that. And that's what happens in the community, and that's the way it can happen here. If we do.
Much. Councilmember Honzak.
wanted to dig in just on one thing. It's a little bit related to what Councilmember Small was talking about there. I'm curious, I see a number of buildings in my neighborhood that are and are medium-sized, aren't receiving the kind of landlords that are needed, or on the flip side, those that have invested and just are feeling, just like you talked about, like it's really burdensome to put in the last years investments they've made. They hope some of them themselves are finding it difficult to account for that. Anyway, so I've been thinking about some of the landlords I can imagine, I won't name them right now, I might later, who might be holding out and waiting for us to do this. Because we're not their resident anyway. So, are there any other carrots that you all have batted around, like tweaks, or could it come through the administrative regs? You talked about, in response to Councilmember Small's query, those buildings that are already in bad shape, review tax, but any other credits? I don't policy block, I don't have this expertise. You know, a tool that would say if a building has invested over the last 3 years in something, you know, in large renovations of the building for dollar amount unit, then you able to get lower credit or something. Have you guys back around anything like that, or is that worth another look? That's because I'm just super keen to see that we motivate the good actors, give and of course it could be better for everyone. But frankly, I'd try to get actors and have them give up their building and swap it out with some.
It's a really good question. I spent a lot of time on the reinvestment credit because, to be quite frank, it's the trickiest of the three in terms of how do you structure a credit when you have everything from a 3-unit building where it's owner-occupied of the units home, and then they functionally have 2, you know, roommates who have other apartments, to a, you know, 125-unit building that's operated by a very sophisticated organization, and how we break that. And the way we land on that 50% is there's, you know, combined with that substantial rehab portion is, you know, if you're a unit building, about $4,000 that you're putting into your building. More for a building. And so while playing around with the numbers, what we were trying to do is kind of, okay, what's a reasonable amount that we're subsidizing? And we kind of did with that 50 for 10 years, assuming that they're going out to get a loan for a portion, 25%, a third of the cost. At that minimum level. It's not perfect, and obviously, you know, we've got a large number, and an unfortunate reality is that smaller unit size, that, you know, 3-unit to 20-unit is served by the market. The way financiers, the way contractors, all of those different tools, resources, and even just other private actors, structures, they all do big building and the same family. And I kind of don't know with anything those two. With 7402 Garland and how difficult that was for Habitat going about doing, essentially turning a single family into a duplex. I want to say they were partners. They went above and challenges that were not only from, kind of outside private groups, but even like government agencies and water and sewer services. So it is tricky. I think part is that what we're trying to do is possible with our limited funds. We're also trying to do the multifamily building improvement grant program, which kind of complements BEPS in some regard, where we're bigger amounts of funds and bring it towards kind of these improvements, and through that kind of big carrot, get them connected with other tools that exist, such as the MIHA grant program, and I'm sorry, I only remember the acronym and not what it stands for. But yeah, it's an ongoing kind of conversation with these property owners. And then, of course, we hold the ambulance to account. And it's never as quick as we would like. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. This is going to be a sorry? No. I realized that this was going to be a pretty long conversation, and special thanks to everyone this evening for staying with us and keeping the conversation going. So seeing that there are no more lights, I would like to move for us to adjourn this evening. Thank you very much. All right, it looks like I'm good. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.